Welcome to the Wise and Happy Life podcast, where ancient wisdom meets modern science, and mindfulness, philosophy, and happiness practices blend with neuroscience, compassion, and common sense. Hosted by Bob Martin, meditation mentor, happiness coach, trial lawyer, and entrepreneur. This podcast explores how to live with grace, presence, and purpose in a complex world.
Hey, everybody, and good people. Thanks for coming back to part 2 with Tigrilla Gardenia's wonderful, wonderful exposition about her relationship with plants and your relationship with plants. And thanks again for coming back and continuing this wonderful conversation. And we ended part 1 with the question, some people have black thumbs and some people have green thumbs, and what's that all about?
So I have a secret that I have to admit, which is I kind of have a black thumb. So I understand in the sense of when I first started working with plants, I have a deep, deep love for grasses, for example. And when I started working with plants, I was like, okay, but I want to have more plants in my home. You know, I want to be able to relate and have relationships with plants in my home. Premise, most of the plants in my home are succulents. And it took me a long time to realize that I thought I was using succulents because that I had succulents in my house because I had a black thumb. Mm-hmm. What I discovered was that succulents actually really represent, they're better mirrors to who I am. I am of somebody who was born in a warm climate. My history comes from a Caribbean island. So I really feel a comfort with tropical plants that I don't necessarily feel with broadleaf plants. I love also conifers and such. So I would say that for the person who's worried about, oh, well, I have a black thumb, it's not so much whether, you know how to take care of plants or not. It's how are you in relation with those plants? And are you working with the plants that actually feel more comfortable to who you truly are? Oh. Because when I try to have certain plants, even in my home, I've tried to bring other plants that are not necessarily in resonance in that same way into my home. And the truth of the matter is that they struggle because we struggle to communicate. So it really is about developing that relationship with a plant and giving that plant the space to do what the plant needs, which might just be, I don't want to be in your house. This isn't a home for me. Find somebody else to take care of me.
Yeah, so
that's okay.
Is there a Briggs-Myers test for plants that?
Great question.
Do I need to figure out?
I think I need to develop this
before I pick my plants.
I do have.
Yeah.
Actually, now that you say it, I have a spirit wild plant quiz. So I have a quiz that maps you to one of several spirit wild plants, which are really what people call weeds, because wild plants are just weeds. So dandelion and cattail and chickweed. So that's a good place to start. Let's take that quiz.
So that's at your website.
It is on my website.
Okay, and we'll get that in the show notes. So, but people that have green thumbs, I mean, if you ask them about plants, they'll say, "Well, I talk to my plants. They feel connected, and they
absolutely.
I think even though when they say it, they poo-poo a little bit that they're just talking metaphorically. But what you're saying is it's not a metaphor. This is for real.
It's not. It is absolutely not a metaphor. And that's exactly it. It's that there is an intuitive feeling. My godmother here in Dummenher would tell me that at one point, in our historic capital, she was the person that was responsible kind of for the landscaping, the plants and stuff. And she's like, I didn't know anything. All I just did was, follow, quote unquote, my instincts. And the land was beautiful. And then she would go to a book and she would confirm. For her, the book would just prove what she already knew. Move this plant over here. And sometimes she would say she would walk by somebody, walk by an area, and she would feel a plant that was like, can you move me? and she wouldn't understand. She would just like go and grab the plant and be like, okay, you need to go somewhere else. And it's really that. And even in myself, when I say I have a black thumb, my problem is I tend to overwater my plants because I become like the nervous Nelly until I relax into it and I'm like, do you need water? And then I find myself being able to really interact differently with the plants in my home. So it is this whole idea that we talk to plants. We're taught that to a certain extent, depending on what circles you're in, it's okay to talk to plants. What we forget is to listen. We have lost our ability or our belief that plants are responding and therefore we don't listen. But when you stop for a second and you just let it land in your body, it's not going to be words always. Some people might get words, but not everybody does. And you let it land, the direction that you need to take will come. And we also have to get very comfortable with the fact that plants are living beings with their own lifespans. And so sometimes a plant will die, and that's okay. That is the moment for that plant to pass. So it's about also asking, like, are you ready to pass? Is this okay for you?
Well, how does this relate to the fact that we eat them?
And this is another great question that I love. Vegans don't like me very much, but I am very like love this. Because it's the fact that all beings, even including ourselves, right, can be nourishment for others in many different ways, right? We nourish people during our lifetime by the way we speak, by the care that we give, by all these other elements. But our bodies also nourish the earth. If we didn't put them into these boxes, if we were just to put them into a simple bag or a simple box or a natural funeral, like the natural cemeteries that are now popping up in many different places, if we allowed that to happen, we too would become nourishment for plants and for fungi and for many other bacteria and other beings, including even animals, if we went down that path, right? So all of us are part of a circle of life. Plant bodies are built in a very specific way where I can take some and sometimes almost all, and there will be regeneration. And so when I again remember that I as a species of nature, right, as a specific species, have a series of abilities based on my physiology. I can start fires and control them. I can, deal with the wind. I can build things. So when I plug that back in to the natural world, I realize that plants are also using me for certain things, right? I'm moving seeds around, I'm giving life to certain species, I'm doing all these things. And oftentimes, if you read, for example, Michael Pollan's book, he believes that plants are the ones that are telling us, grow me because I want to live more. And so it is a reciprocal relationship. And
Mhm.
that's what us eating plants is.
So we had a little conversation off camera, and I want to re up that conversation because I asked you um, a question about, let's say, something that I noticed that deers, my friend's a hunter, and he expressed this to me, and I've seen it myself, that deers seem to be very picky about what they choose to eat and the berries they choose to eat. And you never hear about a deer being poisoned by eating a poisoned plant and the like. And my question to you was, is there some kind of aura or color that we can't see that deers can see that helps them to understand what they should eat and what they shouldn't eat? And you responded, and you were telling me that not only that, but the plant is also communicating with them, saying, take of what you go ahead and explain that again. That was
Yeah.
just so
So
cool.
So this goes back to also that what we were talking about relating to senses. So
Hmm.
plants have several different ways that they communicate back with the species that they are in relationship with. Sometimes it's volatile organic compounds, which are like these airborne compounds, that things that we smell, for example, are oftentimes what is being sent out by the plant to give a signal. There's also other kinds of communications that happened so that plants can even attract. For example, if a plant, orchids are famous for this, using their shape of their body to mimic other kinds of bees or of different perspective, of different pollinators that they have, so that the pollinator wants to come in. And there are several studies that show that plants will give off certain compounds or even make certain kinds of clicking sounds when the pollinator they want to attract is nearby, like saying, pick me, come, I'm going to give you nectar, I'm going to give you maybe a berry, and all I ask of you is to take my pollen or my seed and pull it off and take it somewhere far away so that my children can have a better life than I can. And it's such a beautiful thing to recognize that if when we tune in, right, if you think about hunter gatherers, they didn't have scientific tests. We assume that a lot of them died before telling us that this was something they could eat. But that doesn't even make sense because you don't die on the spot. So you would die much later. So it would be very hard for them to guess which of the plants that they ate that day was the one that made them sick. So plants, going back to those senses, those hunter gatherers had a very uh, subtle relationship with those plants and were able to then say this berry yes and this berry no. At the same time, plants can actually also change the levels of some of these different compounds that are within them, the chemical structures, so that if the deer, which this has happened, if the deer or antelope in this case is the most widely known study, eat too much. For example, there was a drought happening in Africa at one point, and there's a beautiful study that's really interesting about how these acacias were the antelope in the area were dying off in large numbers, and the reason was because of the drought. The antelope were consuming a large quantity of the acacias, much higher levels than they normally did. So the acacias upped to the level of tannins and started to kill off the antelope in order to create a harmony where both of them could survive. Because at
Mm.
the rate that was happening, the antelope were going to overeat all the plants and
Wow.
therefore kill everybody off. But so what's better for the ecosystem is no, let me kill off some antelope so that then I can actually have an ecosystem that functions well.
Wow. Who would have thought?
Exactly. They didn't. They were nobody understood why these antelope were dying until they started to do autopsies and they figured out that this was, and then they were like, where are these levels coming from? Because normally they know the levels the plants have of tannins. And then when they started to test the plants, they realized, oh my goodness, this is like 3 or 4 times the dose that they normally have. So the plants literally upped the dose of those tannins in order to make it deadly. And it's interesting when you think about that in relation to us again as humans. This is one of those areas where we can think about it as models. Where is it? Going back, you were telling me before we started recording of a small book that you're putting out relating to boundaries,
Hmm.
right? And so this is a great example of how plants built up a stronger boundary because they were being attacked to a certain extent, even though it wasn't that the antelope were doing it for harm. They were doing it because they were trying to survive. But the plants made a decision that said, no, I need to protect myself first, because if you eat me, then everybody dies in the end. Because if all of us die off, then you don't have a food source. So I'd rather kill a few of you, make my boundaries really strong for some of you. And then once the herd got to a normal level again, a level that they could manage, they lowered the levels inside of the tannin. So then I can bring those boundaries down when I'm back into a safe environment. It's
Well,
a great model.
it is a great model because I'm just thinking of a different way. what you were talking about is the little book I put together about people that are overly compassionate, people that are over peacekeepers and people pleasers and the like. And I never really thought. I thought of it in boundaries and these nice little soft words, but I think the word that you just mentioned, safety,
Mm-hmm.
is a more compelling word. In other words, I'm happy to give, but I'm not happy to give to the point of where it's not safe.
Right.
And that's
Exactly.
a better way than to say, I'm willing to give, but I'm not willing to give to the point that it exhausts me. Because I
Mm-hmm.
can take exhaustion, but safety, that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking about safety. What a gift. Thank you so much for that. That was great. Um, so uh, for the average homeowner, who's got a little garden out back. Well, first of all, you mentioned in part one, you mentioned a machine, a
Mm-hmm.
box. Is
Yes.
that something that somebody could get a hold? Because
Absolutely. It's called
yeah,
the Music of the Plants. It
yeah,
is a device. The most common one now is called the bamboo. That's the version of it. There's the bamboo and there's the ginkgo. But basically, the Music of the Plants is a device. You can just go to my website / Music of the Plants, and that'll take you to see the music of the plants. It's a very small device now. Unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me. And basically, all you need is it comes with a cable that you connect one sensor into the leaves of the plant and another sensor into the ground to ground it. And you have this beautiful way of interacting with plants. And we have done so many different kinds of studies and collected so many stories over the years. I've had the privilege of traveling all around the world to do presentations and to talk about the music of the plants. And I even conducted a small study into the effects of human health, the effect of plant music on human health. And it's amazing, going back to that awe and wonder that we were talking
hmm
about, and how there are several now, even medical facilities that are studying why is it that people who listen to the music of the plants get much of the effects that we see from a deep immersion in nature. So we do see accelerated healing. We see better levels of mental health, of positive mental health, lower levels of depression. We see many of these characteristics that studies show you experience when you spend time even just looking out the window at a beautiful tree
hmm
can increase your rate of recovery after surgery or after any kind of major intervention, or even just if I live in a city and I can see a little pocket garden, even if that's just grass, like a vacant lot that's grown over, there is science that shows that your depression levels drop. And
Mm.
so the music is a way to bring this inside
Do you
into a relationship.
do you have any of that music recorded on your website? Can we?
Absolutely.
Oh, I can
Yes.
go.
On my
You mean I
website, I
can
have,
go and
yeah.
listen? Oh, that's so cool. That's so
Yep.
cool. That's so cool. That is so cool.
Yes.
And yeah, talk about forest bathing. We've heard that term.
Yeah, forest bathing. I love forest bathing. So Shirin Ryoku is where it was kind of started in Japan. And it is the understanding. So even just on a small level. So forest bathing is really about immersion into nature. When I immerse myself into a natural environment, which could be a city park, just so you know, just a city park, already my body starts to relax. The smells in the air, all of those volatile organic compounds, right? The aerosols that we take in, that smell of pine, for example, all of those things as they come into our body, plus the visual of the green. Remember, I told you green is the greatest receptor we have. It's the soothing color. It is the color that soothes us, physically speaking. And the sounds of getting away from the sounds of cars racing by, but instead of birds, and even just the quiet, which is really not quiet at all, but it's a sound that is resonates within our body. Even just sort of only 20 minutes in this, lowers our cortisol levels by 50%. In other words, our stress goes down by 50%. So forest bathing was something that started with the idea of what happens when I start to give myself permission to immerse myself and to raise that level of awareness, but in, again, a safe environment. So in forest bathing, you experience very slowly, it's not about a hike, because hiking is an exercise thing. This is about slowly going, most of the time with a guide who helps you just focus your attention away from the man-made, quote unquote, stuff, or from the sounds and visuals that actually enhance stress levels, and to focus on more natural shapes, more natural environments with very small things like picking up a stone as I walk, or stopping for a second and sitting with a tree so that I breathe in all those aerosols. I get all those other sensory inputs that I might not even recognize, but that slowly calm me down. And what they find is that over time, as I do this, if I spend a few hours in this sort of nature walk with a guide, I am able to actually enhance my immune system. I'm able to enhance natural killer cells, those cells that actually protect the body. I'm able to decrease cortisol levels and bring down my stress. I increase breathing so that I get more oxygenation happening in the body. There's a whole series of different pieces. And then there's the awe and wonder piece that they're still studying, which that awe and wonder, similar to a meditation, enhances other aspects of your physical body. And even if you can't get out, they have found that even just staring at a picture of nature, change the background of your computer, the desktop, to being a nature scene, and whenever, or have a plant near you, and whenever you feel that stress coming up, soften your focus and just give yourself, those 10, maybe 20 minutes to just breathe with this. You'll start to feel the difference.
At the Greater Good Science Center in Berkeley, they've been studying awe, and they've created a practice called the awe walk, and they've even created a video called the awe walk, which gives you exactly that. You could sit at your desk, you throw the video on, and for 5 minutes it walks you through the most beautiful natural surroundings, and it does have an amazing effect on you. But you mentioned a guide, and I can tell you that in my area of North Carolina, you're not going to find very many forest bathing guides. Is this something that you can? Is there a manual, a guide? Do you think that it would be helpful to have something to help guide you through that, kind of like a do-it-yourself guide? Is that possible?
So what I tell people is, first and foremost, just start. Even just going outside and sitting on the grass and just looking at grass, which is fascinating because there's never just one type of grass. Grass
And
is
you
always this
like
small
grass.
little community.
You like grasses.
I love grass. I just, the idea of all of these different species living together in this small space, I find fascinating. And I can sit there for hours. And plus, there is all this science behind the idea of grounding, right? Your feet touching the earth, lying down and feeling the grass against your body or the earth against your body. There's an electromagnetic pull that gets you in resonance with the earth. So there's all these pieces. So even just starting with something like that, or taking a walk in your local park or local green space that you might have, all of this is wonderful and a great way to start. There are some, for example, I have a 6-part actually series that is about enhancing your senses with plants. And this you can do both outdoors, walking outdoors, or indoors. And it's to help you sort of enhance your connection and how, like, my vision, so that it's not limited, but that it actually gets more expansive. And this also has that effect. And there are some videos online or some audio that online that you can use. But honestly, a great way to start. People often ask me, where do I start? And I said, look, if you're an indoor person, because I know plenty of people that are indoor people who do not feel comfortable, just sit with a plant in front of you and soften your gaze and sit there and give yourself just 5 minutes and breathe. Imagine oxygen coming out of the plants and coming into you, carbon dioxide coming out from you and going into the plant.
Ooh,
And
ooh,
this
ooh, ooh,
circular type
ooh.
of breath.
Oh, you've given me a wonderful idea to write a meditation script for exactly that.
Yep.
I think that would be what
Yep.
I'm going to work. Can I send it to you when I've done it?
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely. I start most of my meditations this way because it's such a simple thing that connects us
yeah,
back.
yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
have
No.
a meditation series with, I'm a Kabbalist also. So I have a meditation series with plants. But the truth is, it would be wonderful for someone like you with the amount of experience to incorporate this element and help people, whether you're walking outdoors or walking indoors. So, walking meditation, or you're sitting with a plant. Start with that breathing and then just allow yourself to go. And whenever you feel it, sit. This isn't about hiking. And my friend who is a woods guide and I go out a lot. And when he guides, it's a hike and he tells me about all kinds of stuff. When I guide, it's walk, walk, walk. Let's sit down, touch this rock, look at the grass, or sit with the pine tree or with the larch, which is two different ways of doing it. They're both excellent because I'm still breathing in that air and I'm having that connection.
Mm-hmm.
But it's about giving yourself that space to
Yeah.
connect in that way.
There's a special meditation that's pretty intense called seeing yourself through the eyes of a loved one. And I'm just thinking of a meditation called seeing yourself through the eyes of a plant. Again, using eyes metaphorically.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Uh, so,
Yes,
one
that
last
would be
question.
wonderful.
One last question. So, like I say, there's a lot of folks who have their backyard gardens and the like. Now, my wife is a landscape designer. She loves plants.
Mm.
She started out as a master gardener, and she just loves gardening and she loves plants and the like. And then she found out about landscape designing. Funny, when she was in her mid 60s, and she'd never taken algebra, so she didn't even know what a protractor or right triangle was. So she had to teach herself algebra so that she could design the plots. But anyway, she studied real hard, and she has a very good knowledge of what a plant is and the different cultivars and where they should be planted, part sun, part thing, all of that, and the size and the shape and design. Um, Functions and the like. Uh, but I wonder if some of that doesn't, some of that study and that didactic information doesn't displace some of that deep intuitive awe that you might feel. I wonder, and would it be helpful for her to sit with plants, maybe just sit with them?
Absolutely. And here's the thing. Most of these types of, and I'm not saying your wife, I'm saying in general, many of these types of classes and stuff teach for artificial beauty. And I say this because in the world of humans, if we think about the lawn, I don't know if you know the history of the lawn, but the lawn was a status symbol. The idea that it started in England, and I think like the 1500s, if I remember correctly. But the idea that I am so rich, I have so much money that I could have all this land without using it, not for agriculture, not to feed people, not to entertain people, not to do anything. It became this status. And in that period, around those times, control became the thing of beauty. The tight corset, the hair that was manicured in a certain way, all of these things were beauty became control and restriction. When I have the ability to either control myself or control others. And unfortunately, for many people, landscape gardeners work on that same premise. You plant will do what I want you to do. So you're going to flower when I want you, and I'm going to rip you out if you don't flower the way I was. I went to Chelsea Flower Show many years ago with the Music of the Plants, and I was warned beforehand. They're like, you're going to hate the last day. You might want to just avoid the last day, because everything just gets ripped out and thrown out because all these plants are being treated as these commodities for our own visual eye candy and for them to do what we want. Instead, and those types of gardens, unfortunately, do not have the deep healing that we get to see in other less quote unquote manicured gardens. And so, as you said, sitting and having the land tell you what wants to be there, sitting in that relationship, then the garden becomes a relationship. And a relationship, I've spoken to, my master's is from the School of Architecture. So we talked a lot about these types of conversations because it's on plants, social innovation, and design. The idea of sitting with the plants and sitting with the land and sitting with the owners of the land, if we're talking about you're a landscape gardener for somebody else, and having of what is it that the people and the land want to do together? What are the plants that best represent this relationship, so that when a person comes home, it's like a friend that you feel as you walk through the garden then at that point absorbs all of that negativity, all of that condition, all that stuff that you've had to deal with in the outside, quote unquote, outside world. The garden is then becomes the ability for you to heal all that. Not the, oh, I have to change that plant because it's the wrong season and therefore it's not the right color for what I need, which is just another stressor. It's
Yeah.
another stressor over it. And
Mm-hmm.
so the plant becomes this relationship that I'm having, and how I'm growing, whether I'm growing food or whether I'm having a visual garden, which or I'm having other types, an auditory garden in the case of the Music of the Plants, or a smell garden for some people who have, maybe I'm visually impaired, then I might have a garden that has a lot of scent to it, and my
Mm-hmm.
healing comes through that sense. So it's about understanding if the people in the house are more sensitive to smells, if aromatherapy is something that makes them feel good when they go get a massage, then thinking about how the plants should have those types of relationships. It doesn't mean you throw out your knowledge, but you kind of throw out the control that you were taught with that knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And I know that what you're saying is true because fortunately, our backyard is wild. I mean, we've
Yeah,
kept all the
my
trees
favorite.
I think it became wild by accident because she'll go out and do a job and there's some leftover plants and she'll come and say, "Here's a home for you."
Yeah.
And they're all over the place and it's gorgeous and it is healing. And when
Mhm.
I think of an English garden, with
Right.
I'm thinking now, how do I feel when I'm in a place like that? And I know what I feel. I feel admiration.
Yep.
I feel admiration and I feel not even balance, but admiration is the word. But that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that I feel good. I
Right.
admire it, but I don't feel like I'm connected to it.
Right.
It's somebody else's, and it's not my people. These are not my
Yeah.
people.
And it doesn't make you feel relaxed. You
No.
might sit there and have a moment, but you're not sitting there like, "Oh, yeah, I wanna, just
Yeah.
hang out
Yeah.
here." I might sit there because I need to read a book, or I feel like I'm supposed to be doing it's almost like the garden is chastising me. And it's that feeling. And so it's the admiration that how did I get that plant to do that? But then you realize that that's still an exercising of control.
Hmm.
And it's not as nourishing at that point as it is for me, like you said, let me find a home for you. Where do you feel most at home? And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, if you feel at home, then I feel at home.
Okay. we could talk forever, and I am so excited about this conversation, but we gotta put an end to it somewhere. So can you your website has a
Yes.
lot of information, and if I want to continue reading and exploring this area, it's a great place to start.
Yes, because my website has all the information, plus it has access to my own podcast, which is
Hmm.
Reconnect with Plant Wisdom, where I talk about all these topics with guests and
Hmm.
also solo episodes.
Okay, great. And that website is
Very easy, tigrillagardenia.com. So it's
okay.
basically my name all together, and that's what all my social media is.
And the
At
quiz you talked about is there.
It's yes, the Discover Your Spirit Wild Plant. Yes.
Okay, well, I can tell all the listeners you got to go there because I'm going to be there. I'm going to spend some time there. I just absolutely adored speaking with you and spending time with you.
Me
And I'm going to
too.
come visit you.
Yay!
I definitely got to come visit you. So let's stay in touch. And everybody, I really hope that you'll go to Tigria's website and explore. Um, and I am going to have a completely renewed experience of my own backyard thanks to you. Thank you so much.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful conversation.